Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Mental Junk Food, and this is the place where we talk about all things comics, sci-fi, horror, fantasy, pulp culture, and everything in between. And I am, of course, your host, C.B. Smallwood, reporting from a secret location near the Earth's core where it's nice, toasty, and warm, where I'm safe from the thing that shall not be named because the YouTube algorithm will lay down its algorithm hammer upon thee, okay? And I hope you're doing well. I'm doing all right. And so with that said, let's talk a little bit about today's headline, which is Diamond Comics distribution. And they're not going to be able to pay anybody. They're not going to be able to pay the comic book publishers and a couple other people. And who knows? Will they be able to pay their own employees? I don't know. And then there's also the broader question that concerns this individual and other people of his ilk, which is... will comic book professionals who are in a bit of a bind, will they be open-minded to working with Richard C Meyer and Ethan Van Sciver and other Comicsgaters? Because right now, Comicsgate is still going. It's still being successful in terms of their Indiegogos. So, yeah, that's a good question, and we'll unpack that in just a bit. But first, I just want to remind everybody that I have a comic book that I'm working on that I'll launch an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter for sometime in the future once it's done. It's called Wildcat. It's written and drawn by me. And it's not finished yet. Still working on it. So if you're interested in Wildcat, if it looks cool to you, then I'll leave a link down in the comments where you can sign up to the mailing list, and you'll be notified as soon as I'm ready to launch Crowdfunder. With that said, let's get into today's article, which is written by Bleeding Cool and written by the infamous Rich Johnston. And I quote, "Over the weekend, Bleeding Cool reported that Marvel Comics had agreed to extend terms to Diamond Comic distributors. This meant that Marvel didn't demand payment from Diamond as usual, as Diamond closed its doors to new products because of the thing that shall not be named. Diamond also allowed comic book stores to put their own account with Diamond on hold as well. We had also mentioned that Diamond had made redundancies at the company as well." So let's look at this word, redundancies. If I can highlight things here, if I can use the power of this mouse. I don't have that ability. Why is it not doing it? Come on, there we go. There, I knew I could do it if I just tried hard enough. Redundancies. I think redundancies is a fancy, tasteful way, maybe, of saying you're fired, you're let go. Maybe in a redundancy, maybe the people that let go has the potential to be rehired. I don't know. But for whatever reason, I think this is a bit of a dishonest word. That's not no shade thrown toward the author of this article. I just feel like it's a dishonest word in the English language. You got let go, you got fired, you got canned, whatever. Anyway, so let's reread it in that context. We also mentioned Diamond had made some firings at the company as well. Stan Heidman, president of Diamond-owns Geppy Family Enterprises, has now issued the following message to comic book publishers who distribute through Diamond, and it's not good news. Heidman writes that Diamond comic distributors will not be able to pay comics publishers and other suppliers this week as planned. And this is their statement. "Dear Diamond vendor, as the world responds to the thing that's happening, of the thing that shall not be named, our focus is on protecting employees, understanding the risks to our business, evaluating the risks to our industry, and examining the federal government resources available. While the full impact of this thing that shall not be named is still unknown, one thing is certain. Supply chain disruptions have cash flow implications across the extended industry that can't be underestimated. While we work to understand the current industry landscape, the unfortunate truth is we are no longer, they've already got it highlighted, but I'm going to double it up. We are no longer receiving consistent payments from our customers. This requires that at this time we hold payments to vendors previously scheduled to release this week. This is a difficult decision, not one that we make lightly, And as this situation continues to evolve, we're committing to building out a plan for payment, and we'll have more information to share later this week. Thank you, and blah, 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 blah. And so there's that, okay? What's this mean? I mean, I think the article pretty much explains it well, but if we were to unpack it further. So, basically, the way the comic book industry works, it's pretty weird, you know, like when stuff gets sold, when comic books get sold in the shop, and you know, it takes a while for that money to filter up to the people that publish the comics and make the comics and write the comics and ink the comics. It it takes, I don't know, like several weeks for different things. And I think in terms, if you're a publisher, I think they do things quarterly, you know, and so it's like every couple of months you receive your payment, you know, from the profits that you made. There's different things for different folks, so I'm not sure how Diamond does it. But if things are done quarterly, that means that a couple of months have already went by and people's living on their savings. And if you're an artist, if you're a writer, and all this other stuff, whatever creative teams are working for different comic book publishers that are waiting on their paycheck, that paycheck might possibly be delayed. Who knows? It's a bad situation to be in. And without looking at the people that make the books, looking strictly at the comic book companies, the publishers themselves, that puts them in a bind, because there's a lot of publishers that are already hanging by the what is it? The skin of their fingernails. What's that expression? They're hanging on by their fingertips. You know, they're barely hanging in there, and then this happens. So it's not a good thing. And you know, Diamond Distributors is not to blame for this thing. I blame Diamond Distributors for taking comic book racks out of the mom and pop stores. That's one of the most terrible decisions ever made in the history of the comic book industry. You know, for short-term gains, they lost long-term longevity. Longevity. There we go. There's my English. They lost the long-term longevity, you know, of the comic book industry, because you're not going to pull in any more new readers. Because most people, regular folk, don't go to comic book stores because they tend to be in the middle of nowhere. And I know I harp on this awful lot. I know I talk about this awful lot. But it's really important, and we got to get back to putting comics where people know where they're at. You know, that's how you get new readers. But anyway, Diamond's to blame for that. But as far as like Diamond not having the money to pay the publishers, that's not their fault. That's just a result of how things are going. Now, as promised, let's segue over this into the realm of Comicsgate. Comicsgate, yes, a dirty word for some, and a word of pride for others. And here's one of the few pictures in existence of the man himself, Richard C Meyer, formerly of Diversity in Comics, and I can't remember what his new channel's called. Forgive me on that. But anyway, I imagine that he has contacts with a lot of people that work in the comic book industry, people that contact him privately, as does Ethan Van Sciver of Cyberfrog fame, and before that Green Lantern and a couple other things. And these individuals, they have their contacts, people that talk to them about stuff that goes on. And I'm willing to bet that there's probably some people that's interested in working for him, you know, that have been interested, but because they work for Marvel or they work for DC or somebody else, they're afraid to say so publicly, because that would end their ability to get jobs in those companies in the future. They would be blacklisted. But things have changed. The industry is going through a change. It's going to be interesting how things kind of shake up after all this is over. And we're already seeing a lot of changes in terms of new distribution models beginning to form. Diamond going to be put in a bad spot. Diamond may actually go away. Who knows? Or they're going to be like a small company. They're not going to be the beast that they once was. And certainly their monopoly could be over. And then a change in business practices on the part of Marvel and DC. Are they going to reduce the amount of books that they're going to put out? There's a whole lot of things that potentially is going to happen after everything kind of blows over and we start to go into recovery mode. Not just as a comic book industry, but as a nation and people all over the world, for what we're going through, right? So anyway, getting back to this particular topic, talking about Richard C. Meyer here, I imagine that since the landscape of things have changed, that there's going to be some comic book professionals that are going to be more apt to work with him and Ethan Van Sciver and other Comicsgaters, because at the end of the day, do you want to flip burgers or do you want to make comics? I think that's the question that some people is going to be having to ask themselves in the coming months. Because if Marvel and DC start to streamline their books and publish fewer books and focus more on quality, which I don't know if they will do that or not, that's just an assumption, a possibility. But if that does happen, that means a lot of people will be let go. And so are we going to see people reaching out to him and others? And let me mention this article right quick. Now, for those of you that don't know, what is Comicsgate? Now, first of all, it's really difficult to find information about Comicsgate that is not, how do you put it, middle of the road. You cannot find middle of the road information about it. If you go and look at the Wikipedia, it's slanted in the choices of its terminology and the words that they've chosen to use to explain what it is. And it's very difficult to find information and give you an insight of what that whole movement is about. But I pulled up this old article from Bleeding Fool with an F. Not Bleeding Cool, but Bleeding Fool. It was written by Jameson Ashley back in September of 2018. And if I can pull this up, Comicsgate, according to this author, is an online movement promoting the idea that the comic book industry, as mainly represented by publishers Marvel and DC, is overly saturated in promoting political messaging that is meant to appeal explicitly to only one demographic that is not interested in the medium, to the detriment of the existing consumer base in the industry as a whole. It also addresses the lack of professionalism, inclusivity, objectivity, and accountability of publishers and their employees, i.e. Management, editors, writers, artists, and whoever else, when dealing directly with the customers. Now, this is like, this quote right here represents what is the best of Comicsgate. What a lot of the best of Comicsgate say that Comicsgate is, which of course, like any other group, there's probably turds as well, that represent the opposite, for all we know. And also, before I go further, this Comicsgate article slants toward the more positive leaning, so I just want to point that out for those of you that want to hear that. So here's a couple of things. These are tweets by comic book professionals, and these are used as examples of things that Comicsgate is supposed to be against. For example, we got a quote here from Max Bemis. By the way, if you're looking for social justice warrior undertones in Moon Knight, they're not there. That being said, I effing hate you personally. And that was written in December of 2017. Here's one from Dan Slott. If I wanted to sell more comics, I'd shut up about gun control, climate change, gay marriage, blah, 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 and make everybody happy, but F it. Smiley face. That was back in 2016. Somebody replied, at Dan Slott have Marvel never warned you off of it? Because I know they'd love to sell more comics. And Dan Slott writes back, nope. So that's a couple examples. Comicsgate focuses mainly on superhero genre, especially those superhero books put out by the industry giants Marvel and DC, but has less to say about the wider spectrum of comic book styles. While people participating in the campaign will occasionally issue complaints about smaller independent comic books, those titles tend to go unmentioned, probably due to their lower sales numbers and smaller target audience. Comicsgate participants, which include some industry professionals, focus on whether they consider to be examples of writers and artists who claim to have been coerced to toe the company's political line, or conversely, who feel who they feel, if I can read this right, promote far left politics unorganically and exclusively in their comic book storylines. As a result, as the campaign, I should say, is made up of customers and fans with various political beliefs across the spectrum of all races, colors, creeds, genders, identities, and backgrounds, Comicsgate participants assert that the movement itself is apolitical for everyone who loves the industry of comics. Which that's true. There are, believe it or not, people who are identify as leftist, or people who are even communist, who are part of Comicsgate. You know, they support it because they believe it's just a common sense thing. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it's not, because I'd rather leave that up to you, viewer, to decide for yourself. I'm just providing this information out there for you to make up your own mind. Participants in Comicsgate sometimes portray their efforts as a consumer revolt. However, there is inconclusive evidence that the response from companies they wish to affect has been successful, or that Comicsgate has been able to persuade those companies to change their hiring or creative decisions in significant ways. Comicsgate has not, so far, organized any form of boycott against the companies or creators they dislike. Now, I think, out of this whole thing, this is really interesting, and this doesn't get really talked about a lot. There are a lot of people in Comicsgate, probably about half of them, that the original Comicsgate, that was all about, trying to get through, I guess, to Marvel and DC about things that they didn't like and things that they wanted changed, right or wrong. They wanted stuff changed, right? They wanted a call to more professionalism, and then there was, a change of storylines and different things. I know I'm being very, very general here, but they wanted stuff changed. And these comic book companies and these editors and writers and artists, blew their noses up in the air and said, that's not happening. And then, a lot of times they took it a step further and, said, screw you. And, Comicsgate has never, as far as I know, as this article has cited, they've never went after advertisers. Because that would be the only way that you get people to change their behavior, is to go after their source of income, where the money's at. But they've never went after their advertisers or anything like that. But the closest thing I can think of was when a YouTuber by the name of Umbrella Guy, there was something that was going on with G.I. Joe and with the writer. I think it was the writer of G.I. Joe, some of his views and some of the things that he had said concerning, was it 9/11? I can't remember. And his viewers got in contact with, I think it was IDW, don't quote me on that, and made them aware of it, and also made, I think, Hasbro aware of it and stuff like that. So that's about the only time something like that has been done, as far as I know. Comicsgate takes its name from Gamergate, an online campaign by video game fans that begun around 2014, which has its goal in honesty and integrity in games and journalism, and a pushback against perceived political correctness in video game publishing and journalism, which was overshadowed by multiple media outlets, if I can speak properly, reporting this as nothing more than online harassment by a vocal minority. I hate it when people do stuff like that, being dismissive of someone's viewpoints, finding creative ways to do that, Here's another quote that the article presents from Tom Brevoort. I'm sorry, I don't intentionally mean to mess your name up. I'm just bad with everybody's names. Said that most at Marvel fanboys are misogynist crybabies who fear strong gals like America Chavez, Unbeatable Wasp, Thor, and Squirrel Girl. And this is written back in 2017. And this right here is a list of complaints that typify what Comicsgaters believe are the problems in the comic book industry, which include, and I'm not going to read all this, you can pause this video and read it for yourself. So there you have it. I felt like it was important to kind of give a recap on this because basically there's not a lot of good information out there on what Comicsgate is and is not. Of course, this article is slanted in the positive towards Comicsgate. It leads in that direction, and so you can find 9 out of 10 times on the internet many negative articles about Comicsgate. I encourage you to read those, just like how I just read this thing to you, so that way you can be more informed and know a little bit more about stuff. And the best thing to do is, if you're curious, just to actually ask the Comicsgater, where they stand on things and what they think about stuff. If that is your prerogative, if you actually want to know more. And then, also ask people that have bad things to say about Comicsgate, why they think the way they do, I believe in actually trying to research things and understand them fully and not just relying on one news source to form an opinion. So anyway, back to the main thing, about the idea of the comic book industry, individuals approaching Richard C. Meyer and Ethan Van Sciver wanting jobs in these dark times. I see it as a strong possibility. Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you agree with that? Disagree with that? Where do you think things are headed? I got a cat outside my door meowing like a madman, so I'm going to have to end this video here soon. Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you agree or disagree with anything? You all tend to be a lot more articulate and well thought out and well spoken than I am. I read each and every single one of your comments, the ones that you agree and even disagree. And especially the ones that disagree, because more than likely there's probably other people that feel the way that you do, and so it's good that you post the things that you post so people can see that an opposite point of view in opposition to this video was put out. As always, love y'all, appreciate everything. This is CB Smallwood, and I will see you in the next video.